Hey friends, spring is finally here in my parts of the world in Zone 6B, Transylvania, Romania. The sound you can hear in the background is the sound of snow melting, and I'm really excited to document a new season. For those of you that have been following me for a while, you probably know that I've been gone and I haven't posted anything because I haven't been feeling so well, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But I'm really happy to be back. Now, there's not much going on in the garden, but today's video is actually going to show you my indoor nursery because I've been very busy sowing lots of things. For those of you that are new here, welcome. My name is Adriana. Like I said, I garden in beautiful Transylvania, Romania, Zone 6B. And this channel is not really about teaching you anything. I do have a blog, but I only have about 3-4 years of gardening experience. I just wanna take you along vlog style and just document what's going on in my garden. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So we're now in my growing room. Sorry about the construction work outside. And also, if you haven't noticed, let me introduce you to my bump. I'm very pregnant at the moment. I only have about 10 days to go. And this is also one of the reasons I've stopped posting. I've had some issues with chronic pain, and then I got pregnant. It was a very tough pregnancy. Then winter came, there was nothing to show. So yeah, that's in a nutshell the reason why I stopped posting. But hey, this is life, right? So gardening indoors is a life savior in this season of my life when we're expecting our first child in the middle of spring, when there's so much work to do. And for all gardeners out there, you probably know that you plan your entire spring around sowing, around transplanting, and you don't go in any vacations. You just stay home and tend to your seedlings every day for at least 2 months. That was in my case. So at this point, gardening for us is no longer a hobby. It's actually a necessity because we are self-sufficient in so many root vegetables, beets, carrots, potatoes, just to name a few, celeriac, and also self-sufficient in onions, in garlic, in leeks. So we don't have to buy a whole lot during the winter time, and they are actually lasting us throughout the Hungry Gap, which is really great. So this year I was really wondering which route to go. Should I direct sow the seeds in the ground so it would be less work, or should I sow them indoors like I did here? Because after having my baby, I will probably not be able to do much in terms of bending over and all that. Not that I'm able to do it now, I'm just sowing seeds indoors. So I will rely a lot on my husband to do all these things. And in the past years, I've had a lot of issues with seeds not germinating outside, either because it was too cold or the seeds weren't good quality, or who knows why, but I don't want to take that chance. That's why I consider starting most of the seeds that are possible to start indoors. I consider that the key to success in such a small garden where you have to practice intensive gardening, have everything planned, and plant everything really close together. The other thing about direct sowing is that you'd think that it's less work, but for me it's actually more work because you have to do a lot of thinning afterwards, and you get patchy germination. You don't have a lot of control with positioning your plants. There are some things that I have to direct sow, like carrots, but I don't know about you, but for us, thinning carrots is like the least favorite activity in the garden. I even like weeding more than thinning carrots. So know yourself. I know a lot of gardeners that just pop the seeds in the ground. I am more of a control freak. I like to have everything lined up and ready to go. And because my husband will be taking over for a month or two, I want to be right by his side and tell him where to pop all these modules behind me. So I'm going to take you on a quick tour on these shelves to show you what I've sewn so far. And then I'm going to give you a few tips that I think are crucial to the success of your indoor nursery. So my growing setup consists of this heavy-duty shelf with 3 shelves. I have 3 Mars Hydro TS2000 growing lights that I am very, very happy about. No complaints here. This year what we've done differently is purchase 2 growing mats, which are under here. Just regular, no particular brand of growing mats. And we have them all plugged in here. The lights are plugged in a timer, so they work 16 hours on, 8 hours off. And the growing mats, the heating mats, they work 24/7. We've chosen this setup because the room is really cold throughout the winter. It's almost near freezing, sometimes below freezing. So every once in a while, twice a week or every 2 to 3 days, we plan on firing up this stove to make it warmer in here. But it's safe to say, and I have a thermometer to prove it, that the temperature on these heating mats is really good. It's perfect for germination, and you can see lots of happy plants growing in here. So let's start from the top. So let me start my tour at the top here. We have our peppers happily growing in here. We have our chili peppers and our eggplants, and they all look pretty much the same at this stage. We're going to transplant them a little later. Now these are the heat-loving plants that I've sown so far. I haven't started tomatoes yet because these lights, they are so strong that they will just grow so fast and flower, and outside it will be still too cold for transplanting them. So everything else that you will see in here is going to be cool weather crops. In here we have just a mix of random things. We have some radishes, we have some turnips. Actually no, they're sweets, sorry. Sweets that always get leggy for some reason. Last year they got really leggy too. And hang on, I just want to show you how I thin them. I use scissors to thin them because they're so fragile that I don't want to pull everything out of the ground. We have some Brussels sprouts here, but they haven't germinated so well. And I have some extra broad beans in the back. Over here, another cool crop that I plan to also direct sow to see how they're doing. I have spinach, about 2 to 3 varieties of spinach, and I also have some chard. And in here, I'm supposed to get some beets, but they haven't germinated yet, and they will look a lot like these guys. They will be also multi-sown, so no thinning here. Over here, we have our broad beans. I should probably take them off the heat mats because I don't think they benefit from it that much. But I wanted to make sure that the parsley germinated. So yeah, a lot of mix and match in my trays. That's because sometimes things don't germinate and then I have to start a new tray and sow some other things, and that's how it goes. My kohlrabis and some brassicas look excellent as always. We have giant kohlrabi here. We have some kale. We have some purple early kohlrabi and some Lonro kohlrabi. This is going to be probably bunching onions and all the things that haven't germinated that well. like sweets and stuff. Okay, so over here we have all the things that will be pricked out. I'm going to prick these out today. These are lettuces, 6 varieties of lettuce. And I start them out like this in these trays because it's very economical. It saves me a lot of space. And also with lettuce you always have to prick it out, so there is no sense in starting it in a tray like this. The same goes with marigolds, and the same goes with celery and celeriac, which are very, very slow growers. I don't know what this is, but this is not celery. Okay, they're very slow growers and they will need to be pricked out when they're bigger. Over here we have some bunching onions that I've multi-sown, and they're not doing very well. This entire tray was supposed to be bunching onions. My guess is that I've overwatered them and I've left them on the heating mat for too long, and they just didn't like that moist, very warm environment. So what I did was I've sown them again 2 weeks later, and the rest of my onions I plan to plant from sets and not seeds, because all this seed stuff is not going very well for me. And over here I have beautiful, beautiful peas. I always love how peas turn out indoors. And this year I've sown double the amount of peas I've sown last year, because I noticed that I was spacing them too far apart. And I want them a lot closer together so they form this green wall. So we're going to have a ton more peas than we did last year. And in this last tray, I have multi-sown radishes, and also, for experiment's sake, some daikon radishes, because I plan to have daikon radishes in spring and daikon radishes in late summer, autumn, to see which perform best in my climate. It's the first time that I'm growing them. And I also plan to direct sow radishes, so I have a succession of them. And over here, because there's still snow on the ground, I've had some strawberries delivered, but it's too early to plant them. So yeah, this is my garden in a nutshell, what's going on at the moment. So this is the tour of the garden, what I've sown so far. I am by no means done. I have to get tomatoes, herbs, flowers started in April. We also have some direct sowing to do, like planting potatoes, onions as soon as the weather allows it, onions from sets, and obviously carrots and greens like arugula, loose leaf lettuce. But I'm going to keep you posted on all of that. There's always something to sow from March to September. So for today, I want to share with you some tips. If you're new to indoor gardening, what I think is really important is your setup. So I really recommend, if you plan to grow things in a cold room, I also have an article on that, so check in the description box below. But I really recommend a setup like this with heavy-duty shelves and lights and heating mats, because this way you keep all the heat in one place, and the heating mats and the grow lights together, they raise the temperature in that environment over here with about 10 degrees Celsius. So that saves us a lot of heat and a lot of work feeding fire to that stove. The second tip I have for you is to not start things too early. Last year I started many of my seeds, especially peppers, about 3 weeks earlier than I did this year, and the weather was kind of the same. We've had snow in April, if you recall, and all my peppers grew really fast. They started flowering. I had to pick the flowers non-stop. The same with tomatoes, even though I really did start them a lot later. So In my experience, it's really better to plant young transplants like this when they're really small, when they're about 4 to 5 weeks for cold season crops, and about 8 to 10 weeks for peppers, eggplants, tomatoes, and stuff like that. So resist that urge to start your seeds too early if you're in a cold climate like I am. Just be patient. Once the weather heats up, they will ramp up their growth and catch up compared to if you had put them in the ground earlier, and they would get transplant shock and they would get really cold. And tip number 3, if you're having germination issues or if your seedlings are dying, just don't give up, start again. You do have time, don't worry. So it happens to me, even though it's my 3rd time doing this. My onions didn't do so well, my sweets didn't do so well, Brussels sprouts, kale, I've just sown them all again. And you have time to do that too. And lastly, if this whole thing just looks too expensive and complicated and time-consuming for you, and you would just rather put your seeds in the ground, it's perfectly okay to do that. Don't feel like you have to have a fancy setup like I do here just to be a good gardener. So enjoy the process, do what works for you, and until next time, my friends, happy gardening.